From its inception, the Galactic Senate had been led by a Supreme Chancellor, who acted as the Senate's figurehead and the overall leader of the Galactic Republic. There were thousands of Supreme Chancellors throughout the history of the Republic, but most Star Wars fans are only familiar with the final two, Palpatine and Finis Valorum. But we have names and stories of many Supreme Chancellors apart from these two. Valorum had been preceded by Supreme Chancellor Kalpana, and he by Supreme Chancellors Frix, Darus, Pekivas, and so on. In this video, we're going to be discussing all of the named Supreme Chancellors in Legends and ranking them based on their effectiveness.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
We're going to divide the Chancellors into 4 categories. Those we don't have enough information about to judge, those who are unambiguously horrible, those who are mediocre to decent, and those who are renowned for their excellent service to the Republic. We're going to go through the categories in that order, starting with the Chancellors we just don't know enough about to make any judgments on. The earliest of these was Supreme Chancellor Afeltelti, who ruled the Republic in around 13,000 BBY when the Alon Nova Guard joined the Republic. They're known for nothing else other than facilitating the long-standing alliance between the Republic and the Nova Guard, which did benefit the Republic in many of its wars, to their credit. Another very old one was Supreme Chancellor Nagratha, who in 7,786 BBY gave a speech commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Republic's victory in the Waymancy Storm. There was also Supreme Chancellor Signet Mezzaline, who ruled over Coruscant in some fashion or another for 70 years, and is known for nothing apart from his love for Galactic City. During the era of the Sith Wars, there was Supreme Chancellor Vokatara, a former rocket jumper who commissioned the Juggernaut war droids for the use of the Republic military during the Gank massacres. Supreme Chancellor Jebavel Madon, a puppet of former Chancellor Saresh, who was elected in 3,632 BBY and only lasted a few years, and Supreme Chancellor Vedij, who presided over the 17th and final Alsakan conflict. There were also a few little-known Chancellors in the Golden Age of the Republic, including Supreme Chancellor Anwis Edicus, who dealt with the Death Seed Plague of the 700s BBY, Supreme Chancellor Ixus Valorum, of whom nothing is known, Supreme Chancellor Valia Pekivas, whose administration experienced a minor conflict of interest scandal, Supreme Chancellor Frix, under whom the Senate continued to become increasingly corrupt, and Supreme Chancellor Kalpana, Finis Valorum's predecessor, who had a strong anti-slavery stance and led the Republic through the Stark Hyperspace War. With all those out of the way, we can finally move on to the interesting Supreme Chancellors, beginning with the ones that sucked. We'll start at the very bottom of the pile of bad Chancellors with the worst of them all, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Palpatine was effective in achieving his political aims, but his political aims were destroying the Republic, which we would say makes him an objectively terrible Republic Chancellor. You already know a fair bit about Palpatine, and his full story is a video in itself, so we'll leave it at that for him and move on to the Chancellors you probably don't know nearly as much about. Just above Palpatine are the Chancellors of the Contispex dynasty, who ruled the Republic during the Pius Dea era. This political dynasty was founded by Contispex I, an adherent of the Pius Dea cult, who converted the Republic into a Pius Dea theocracy that waged a series of brutal crusades against the galaxy's alien species, ushering in a 1,000-year dark age for the Republic. During the Pius Dea era, the Republic was led by a series of 19 Supreme Chancellors, all of whom took the name Contispex, regardless of whether or not they were actually blood relatives of Contispex I. All of these beings were power-hungry, genocidal monsters who converted the Republic into a war machine that persecuted its own people, slaughtering untold trillions and pillaging countless worlds. They were effectively dictators of the Republic, and their age only came to an end when the Jedi started a civil war to oust Contispex 19, who spent the rest of his life serving a richly deserved sentence in a Kamasi dungeon. Needless to say, every single member of the Contispex dynasty belongs at the bottom of this ranking. Speaking of would-be dictators, let's talk about Leontine Saresh, one of a series of Supreme Chancellors who ruled during the Galactic Wars in the 3600s BBY. This era was a chaotic one for the Republic, and Supreme Chancellor Saresh, an heiress of the wealthy and politically powerful Saresh family of Taris, initially did a fairly good job of leading the Republic through this dark time. But the Saresh family was well known for their dark side, pronounced cruelty and arrogance that many members of the line displayed, and while Leontine Saresh wasn't cruel, she was certainly arrogant, power-hungry, and aggressive. She was determined to not just see the Republic survive the Galactic Wars, but to see it crush the Sith Empire, and while that was a based and understandable objective, her unwavering commitment to it led to several tactical errors. Saresh also showed her true colors when her term as Supreme Chancellor expired. She did her best to cling to power, even attempting to assassinate the Outlander to take control of the Eternal Alliance. Her scheming and hunger for power eventually destroyed her political career, however, and she was replaced by a much less dictatorial Chancellor. Rounding out the category of bad Supreme Chancellors, we have a few that weren't dictators but who were nonetheless hopelessly corrupt. These include Supreme Chancellor Herzliya, a Bothan whose corruption and unpopular, self-serving policy decisions directly led to the rise of Contispex I and the Pius Dea, Supreme Chancellor Fatum, whose decision to hand over complete control of the vital Koros system to the system's aristocrats caused a corruption scandal that destroyed his administration, and Supreme Chancellor Thoris Darus, a wildly corrupt man who lived an ostentatious lifestyle, spending his time in office gambling, womanizing, and indulging in sport, opera, and high cuisine. Moving on, we have the chancellors that were somewhere in the middle. They weren't corrupt or dictatorial, but they weren't all that special either. We're going to go through these folks in chronological order as well, since they all rank about the same spot anyway. We'll thus start with Supreme Chancellor Sidrona, who presided over the Senate during the Great Sith War. Sidrona was a strong supporter of the Jedi and an effective Supreme Chancellor. He helped keep the Republic stable during the initial stages of the Great Sith War, and after Sith Lord Ulic Qel-Droma was captured after a failed attack on Coruscant, Sidrona oversaw his trial before the Senate, intent on boosting the Republic's morale. This backfired, however, as the Senate chambers were stormed by Exar Kun during the trial. Kun, another Sith Lord, used the Force to take over Sidrona's mind, forcing the Supreme Chancellor to echo Kun's words before the Sith Lord unceremoniously killed him. After Sidrona, we have a series of Supreme Chancellors that all ruled in short succession during the Galactic Wars, the aforementioned period of instability in the Republic. The first was Supreme Chancellor Baruchen, who ruled during the final stages of the Great Galactic War. Baruchen did his best to hold the Republic together during this conflict, but he ultimately failed. He was duped into sending off many Jedi and diplomats to a false peace conference with the Sith, during which the Sith sacked Coruscant. During this attack, Baruchen was killed. His replacement, Supreme Chancellor Paran Amris, had to deal with the failure of the sacking of Coruscant and subsequent partition of Republic space. Amris could do very little, and his time in office was short. He was replaced soon after his election by Supreme Chancellor Dorian Jynarus. Jynarus led the Republic through much of the Cold War, overseeing its rebuilding efforts, but he, too, had a short range, as he was murdered by a bounty hunter in 3640 BBY. He was succeeded by Supreme Chancellor Saresh, who we've already talked about. Saresh and her puppet successor, Supreme Chancellor Madon, were succeeded by Supreme Chancellor Galina Rance, who more or less returned the Republic to the course laid out by Chancellor Jynarus. Moving on from the Galactic Wars, we have one final mediocre Chancellor to discuss, one who truly embodied the concept of mediocrity, Supreme Chancellor Finis Valorum. Valorum was a decent man, the last in a long line of Supreme Chancellors from the Valorum family, but he was ultimately powerless to stop the rise of the Trade Federation and of Senator Palpatine, a former friend who thoroughly destroyed Valorum's political career. Valorum's heart was in the right place, but his hands were tied by corruption in the Senate, and he himself was subject to allegations of corruption. Most of these were manufactured by the Sith, but some of Valorum's scandals may have had more substance. His family's wealth and political history were often cited as the only reason he was able to attain the chancellorship, and he was also rumored to have been having an affair with his staff aide, Sei Taria. Moving on, it's time to talk about the Republic's good Supreme Chancellors, including a few that were considered legendary heroes of the Republic. We'll start with Supreme Chancellor Poltimo, who led the Senate during the Great Hyperspace War and its aftermath. Little is known about his career apart from his most famous decree. He ordered a joint Jedi and Republic military task force to invade and dismantle the Sith Empire after the end of the Great Hyperspace War. While many in Republic government believed the Sith threat ended with the defeat of Naga Sadow, Poltimo knew better, and he worked with the Jedi to ensure that the original Sith Empire was ground to dust, unable to threaten the galaxy ever again. Poltimo had also hoped to liberate the Sith species from their Dark Lords, though this objective failed, as the Sith Lords commend their subjects to carry out mass suicides as the Republic conquered the Sith worlds, leading to the total depopulation of Sith space. The Sith ultimately survived this war, but thanks to Supreme Chancellor Poltimo, they were greatly weakened, and many Sith techniques and power bases were able to be destroyed by the Jedi, greatly benefiting not just the Republic, but all life in the universe. There's also Supreme Chancellor Thalorian, who was Chancellor in 15,500 BBY during the Junogwin contention. This conflict started after Republic scouts accidentally provoked the Junogwin, a race of sentient star dragons, into attacking Coruscant. The Senate wanted to mobilize the Republic Navy, but Thalorian countermanded this order. Instead, he attempted diplomacy, personally making efforts to communicate with the Junogwin. His efforts were successful. The Junogwin turned out to not only be intelligent, but inherently peaceful. Thalorian and the Junogwin philosopher Bors Mator negotiated a treaty between the Junogwin and the Republic, and the two later co-founded the University of Coruscant. Supreme Chancellor Gennara, another legendary Republic leader, presided over the Senate during part of the Republic Dark Age. She was not just the Chancellor, but a Jedi Master as well, as during this period, from 1400 to 1000 BBY, every Supreme Chancellor elected was a Jedi. Gennara held the Republic together during one of the most desperate chapters of its history, and without her efforts, the galaxy almost definitely would have fallen to the Sith. The same was true of Supreme Chancellor Tol Kressa, who presided over the Senate during the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War, the Dark Wars, and the subsequent period of rebuilding. This legendary man led the Republic through 3 of its worst crises back to back, providing political unity and support for vital restoration projects that were essential in helping the Republic survive this chapter of history. Kressa was the first on this list of what we'd consider legendary Supreme Chancellors, leaders who were especially revered by later generations. Another legend was Supreme Chancellor Blotus the Hutt, who defied all the usual Hutt stereotypes. Not only was he not corrupt, but he was a legendarily shrewd statesman. He had a 275-year reign, which happened sometime between 9000 and 8000 BBY. Blotus ushered in an age of prosperity for the Republic, and he was remembered fondly for millennia to come. The same was true for Supreme Chancellor Bill Ductavus, who lent his name to the Ductavus era of Republic history. Ductavus was also the Jedi Grand Master, and he was the first Supreme Chancellor after the defeat of the Pius Dea. His leadership of both the Republic and the Jedi Order played a major role in how quickly the galaxy was able to rebound from the Pius Dea era, and Ductavus was remembered as one of the greatest Supreme Chancellors of all time. But even Ductavus was surpassed by the Republic's most legendary Supreme Chancellor, Tarsus Valorum. This Valorum was the first non-Jedi Supreme Chancellor in over 4 centuries, as he had been elected just after the 7th Battle of Ruusan and the end of the New Sith Wars. Valorum oversaw the passage of the Ruusan Reformation of 1000 BBY, which radically altered the structure of the Republic and ushered in a millennia-long Golden Age. Valorum was the architect of the Golden Age of the Republic. His firm commitment to the people of the galaxy and the ideals of the Republic made him a passionate and effective statesman, one of those rare few politicians that were in politics to make a difference. And Valorum really did make a difference. He reshaped the entire Republic, and the changes he implemented were largely for the better. In our opinion, he deserved the title of the Republic's best Supreme Chancellor. So that's our ranking of the Supreme Chancellors of the Republic. But what do you think? Would you like to see longer videos about any of these people? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.